Barry, it's really, really good to see you. And I'm looking forward to our chat and our talk about your new book, uh, the massive amount of work you've been doing over the years, you and Joyce, and our connections and men's work and a lot of things. So I want to
Great.
welcome you to the living room and this little discussion and podcast we're going to have and share. And good to see you and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, Jed, it's wonderful to see you. It's been years. I know.
It has.
Yeah.
So I wanted to start. I will get into your new book in a bit and some of the other work that you do, but I think anybody who knows your work, looks at your book, or has heard this, there's a quote from Ram Dass that is pretty impressive, and I just wanted to start because I think it's true. I mean, I know you well enough and Joyce well enough to know that it isn't the kind of thing a well-known celebrity says just because it's nice to put on a blurb. But you know what Ram Dass had said, he said he described you and Joyce as a couple who lives the yoga of love and devotion. It's true. They are two people growing in love since 1964 and have raised three children and walk their talk.
I
It's
know
pretty
that.
impressive. And I thought we'd just start a little bit because some people probably don't know who you are at all. And some people know you quite well. And Joyce, so maybe with that kind of introduction, I know my experience has been with people that are well known or have been doing work for a long time. People kind of see us, particularly if we're in a couple and we're talking about relationships of, well, everything, we must have it all down. I mean, we've been doing it a long time and we've been married all these years, and God, you must be the perfect couple. You never have any problems. You get things, and we know that that isn't true. So
Too.
maybe you could just talk a little bit about you and Joyce and your relationship, and maybe from the point of view of, if you're open to it, disclosing a bit about some of the challenges that you've had. I know you do that in some of the
Yeah.
retreats that I've been on with you. You share it in, books to give people a little idea of, the both the breadth and depth and joy of your love and your experience, but
Yeah.
also a little bit about it's had
It's
been years,
real.
had
It's
your had
real.
challenges like we all have. So tell us a little about you and
Yeah.
Joyce and your relationship, and then
Yeah.
we'll get into a little bit more
Well,
about the
yeah,
book and some other
yeah.
things.
Well, on the highest level, I consider my relationship with my beloved Joyce to be a complete miracle. That we found each other, that I mean, it's a miracle, okay? And it's a real relationship. We're not perfect, and we've been together now this month 59 years.
Hmm.
Yesterday was our 55th wedding anniversary. But we know that relationship is a work in progress always, and it's an evolving thing, and it's never perfect. And people think, right, Barry and Joyce, you know, they never fight, right? They never have arguments, they never hurt each other's feelings. Not true, not true. It's actually it's inevitable if you're in a relationship that you are going to be sometimes clumsy or unconscious. And sometimes, yeah, sometimes we say things to our partner we're not meaning or intending to cause problems or hurt the person, but it happens, right? Either one of us will say something that hurts the other, even after all this love, right? And it's the way we process these things that makes the difference. In the old days, we'd say something that would hurt the other, and the other would get angry and defensive and hurt and retaliate, right? Right. But what we're doing now, and I'm not saying we don't sometimes fall into the trap, right? Of getting hooked and getting angry, and it happens, okay? But what we're trying to do, and this is something we teach couples, is, if something is said to you that hurts your feelings, to really go to the intention of the person. Usually they're not trying to hurt you. And so what we try to say to each other, this is really important. We'll say, I trust you didn't try to hurt me when you just said that, but it didn't feel good.
Mm,
And when Joyce says that to me, I trust that you weren't trying to hurt me.
mm,
It it allows me to rise above any defensiveness, right?
mm,
Because if she just says, Barry, you hurt me again, then I can go into a little boy, I did it wrong. I
mm,
blew it. I was bad, right? But when she says those words, I trust you weren't trying to hurt me, I can actually feel better, right? And
mm.
okay, she gets it. And I still need to apologize because yeah, I didn't mean to hurt her, but I did. Anyway, that's just one little example of to answer your question.
Yeah, I mean, that little phrase to start with the idea that I know you didn't mean to hurt me. It
I
it
know.
it tells the truth, but it
Yeah.
also keeps a connection going in the midst of a wounding or a
Yeah.
disconnection. And then you're not burying the truth. Yeah, and this hurt. And
Yeah.
it then can lead to the continuing dialogue and deepening that a good
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
has, that you've certainly developed over these years. And as you well know, I write books and you write books and you've written numerous books, which uh, for me, there's a uniqueness about uh, a couple writing a book. It's not easy to write a book at all. To do it as a couple who are in relationship has its own challenges.
Yeah.
And you've written a book, I know, and we'll talk a little bit more about male and female. You've written a book about love, loving a male, loving a man, loving a woman.
Yeah.
But this book that is your latest book, which I just want to hold up here briefly, and we'll talk about a couple of miracles, which obviously has multiple layers of meaning. Um, and I want to just talk a bit about the experience of writing
Hmm.
a book like this,
Yeah.
because it's not a traditional how-to book of here's
Yeah.
what you can do. It's really about your lives and about not just the point of life that has to do with our love life, because as we all know, you can't separate our love life or our relationship life from the rest of our life. So if you could
Mhm.
talk a little bit about the book, of
Yeah.
how this book came to be, a bit about what it all contains, because it's a very rich kind of meal of depth of both love and the times that you lived in, that many of us lived in similar times, and the places, and a whole lot. And
Yeah.
there's too much to even introduce in the book, but tell us a bit about how you came to write this book and what's in there.
Okay. Yeah, this is our 10th book, and all of our other books, I, you could say they were more in the realm of personal growth, how to, um, but in all of our books and in all of our retreats and workshops, we sometimes tell these stories about, I mean, stories illustrate truths, right? And stories are powerful. And we've never told our whole story, which sometimes I get goosebumps even thinking about it. I mean, just so many things happen. So really, this book is, you could call it a memoir, right? But it's our story, and it's stringing together miracle after miracle, things that you can't explain with your rational mind. Okay. Um, I'll tell one story. Okay. Um, this one story, every time I think about it, I get goosebumps. Okay. Because my mind tries to explain it, but it can't be explained. Okay. I was in high school and I knew, actually, let me back up. When Joyce was 9 years old, okay, she was 9 years old. She was being teased by her older brother. And when she would be teased, she would cry, right? She was very sensitive. She, and her parents, they tried to train her to not be so sensitive, right? As if you can do that, right? But and so when she would cry because she was hurt, even though her parents loved her, they'd send her to her room to cry. Okay, if you're going to have those feelings, you have to be in your room, right? Which is a punishment for feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of sad. But this one day she was in her room. This is in the new book, A Couple of Miracles. 9 years old, and she was crying. She heard a voice. Okay, the first time that she actually heard a voice, and it said to her that there is somebody growing up right now who would hold her when she was having her feelings and would be able to really understand her. And you will recognize him because he will be tall with dark hair, although my hair is not as dark as it used to be, but he will be tall, dark hair, and he will be on his way to becoming a medical doctor. How do you like that for,
That's pretty specific, isn't it?
it's pretty specific, right? And so she had this message that she carried through her childhood, and it helped her. So meanwhile, um, when I knew this story about Joyce, and so after years of being together, I said, we were with my mother, and I said, Mom, do you happen to remember when I decided to be a doctor? And she said, it was the strangest thing. Out of the blue, when you were 9 years old, you announced it.
Well,
9 is an important number in our lives. We're exactly 9 days apart in age. So I mean, for those who are into numbers, there's a lot to that. I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, when I was 18, a senior in high school, I knew I was going to be a doctor, but I was not a good student. I was actually borderline juvenile delinquent. Okay. I was not doing well in my life. And in the spring of my senior year in high school, I got rejected by every single one of the colleges that I applied to. And that really threw me because I knew I was supposed to be a doctor. Okay. One day I was called into the principal's office, which, by the way, it brought terror to me because I thought I was caught for something, right? But instead, he introduced me to this man, an older man, probably around 30, right? Who, in this office, he took me into this office and he said, I'm representing Hartwick College in Oneonta, New York. And took a few minutes to tell me about Hartwick and then said, if you'd like to come and join us in the fall. And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a pen and he said, just sign here. And I looked on the table. There was an application to Hartwick, all filled out with all my personal information, right? And my school transcripts were nearby. And I thought I was kind of naive at age 18 too. And I thought, okay, colleges go around to high schools and find kids who are middling grades, right? And sign them up. And so I signed and I was going to Hartwick College. And I'm convinced, I know for a fact that I needed to be guided by some force to get to Hartwick because Joyce was there. Okay.
Did you have a sense that Joyce was there at that time, or
No,
somebody was
no,
there,
no,
or
no,
it was
no.
just, hey, here's the thing, and I guess I'll sign it.
Right, signed it.
You got the rest of the story later that
Later, I got it.
filled in
Yeah,
the.
I mean, I left the office, and the last thing I remember of this man was he was slapping me on the back, saying, "Barry, you'll never regret this decision." I went home, told my mom I'm going to Hartwick College. She said, Hartwick, where's that? She'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of it. It's a small school, but I got to Hartwick and met Joyce within 2 months. Fell in love very quickly, and told her the story of how I ended up going to Hartwick. Joyce said, have you thanked the administration at Hartwick for recruiting you? And I said, no, I never even thought about it. Right. She said, Barry, go thank them. So I went to the administrative offices and I talked with some woman there and I said, I just want to thank you and thank this man for recruiting me. And this woman looked at me blankly and said, no, there's no such thing. And she said, you should talk to the dean of admissions. So she brought me into his office. I told him the story, and he said, we have never, ever recruited a student, ever. And except for star soccer players. And I didn't play soccer. Okay. But this man just looked at me and said, we have no idea. And he looked through the records and he found my application. There was no mention of this other person. And it kind of blew my mind, right? And nobody knew anything about who this was. And even I contacted my high school and they didn't know who this was. So, you know, there's part of me that I'm kind of becoming more and more a believer of divine intervention
Hmm.
and that there's a higher force that's moving us through our lives and we don't see him. If this was an angel, fooled me, right?
I think that's a wonderful story, obviously, and a little bit, scary in the sense of it's pretty improbable. And, as a medical doctor and, me as a PhD, and I went to medical school. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Right, right.
But I mean, there's miracles that we all, I think, if we're at least sensitive, experience. But there's a rational side of us and there's a rational world. Like I asked myself, so who filled out the application? There was an application with all your information filled
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
Do you think the angel filled that out, or did somebody actually write that thing in there? Or what do you think?
I,
how do you
I
interpret it?
you know,
It's your story.
maybe it was the angel, maybe it was the high school. By the time I got back to the high school after years, right? And nobody knew
Nobody
how
remembered.
that happened.
Yeah.
And
But
so
your counselor or somebody could have filled it out. It may not have been as
maybe,
supernatural as an angel filled it
right.
out and came down in human form. And I mean, it could have been. I mean, who knows?
But
There's
even
some things we just don't understand.
even the fact that I didn't fill out that application, it's
Yeah,
still like, wow,
yeah,
it just doesn't happen.
yeah,
But I had to get to Hartwick.
yeah.
Had to get to Hartwick
And it
to meet Joyce.
changed your life and changed
Yeah,
Joyce's life. And on
yeah,
some level, you kind of knew. Um, I'll just share a little bit because you and I have been colleagues, friends for a long time, and Joyce, we know each other, and
Yeah.
just to kind of fill in a little bit of our story and your story. My wife Carlin and I have been married for now 45 years. Uh, but we had been married twice before, each of us. This
Mm.
is our third marriage.
Yeah.
In fact, if people go to my website, mentallife.com, you see my introduction says Confessions of a Twice Divorced Marriage Counselor. So our journey was a little bit different, but as part of our own, process over the last 45 years, there was a point in our relationship where, it was pretty good. We'd gone through a lot previously. We'd worked through a lot in our previous marriages, but we still had stuff to work out. And over time, things got, dicey and we were missing each other and so on. And had known about you and Joyce, and you at that time had a retreat for couples in Hawaii. And we thought, oh, this is great, a little vacation, and we'll go. And it turned out to be just a wonderful, wonderful renewal of our marriage and our relationship. But it brought up for me some interesting things that I wanted to add in and continue with our dialogue.
Yeah.
Uh, for those that know my work, a lot of my focus over the many years has been on men's health and relationships, and how some of the blocks in who we are as men get in the way of our relationships with our partners. And in our case, in my story that I tell about our 45-year relationship together, is before Carlin and I met, I had gotten involved in a men's group that started a year prior. And it was at a time when my previous relationships had ended. I was in between careers. It was really a very difficult time in my life. And I was invited to a group of guys there was actually a psychologist named Herb Goldberg who wrote a book called The Hazards of Being Male. And he had been invited to put on a little talk on a Saturday, and where I was living in Marin County. And I attended, and after that, one of the organizers had invited whoever was interested to join a men's group, and seemed like a good idea. And I thought, what the hell, I'll join. So I joined a men's group that's now been meeting continuously for 46 years.
Amazing.
Carlin and I, and Carlin will say this if you ask her, that part of what she feels has allowed us to be a successful and have a successful long-term marriage for 45 years is because I've been in a men's group for 46 years. And there's been a lot more to that, but men's group was a very important part of my life, still is. The group that started out is still together. We're going to be meeting again together, although we're spread out. We still get together 4 or 5
Yeah.
times a year, and we'll be meeting again in January. Uh, so I know both you and Joyce have been involved with men's groups and she with women's groups for a long
Yeah.
time. And I
Yeah.
wonder if you could talk a bit about what, how you got into doing men's groups, since I'm talking to you,
Sure.
and what men's work and men's groups have meant in both your own life and how they contribute to you as a man, and you as a person, and you as a husband in relationship to a woman.
Yeah. Thanks, Jed. Uh, I've been leading men's retreats for 45 years, something like that. And um, they fill a place that doesn't get filled by the couples work. And I've always, and Joyce feels the same about the women's work. Um, Even way back, 45 years ago, it became obvious that so many of us as men don't connect deeply enough with each other. That we more seek, if we're hetero, right? We're more seeking to be with women and to connect with women. And it's been so important when we have when I lead a men's retreat, and I don't just lead, I participate. I can't just lead, I have to, if I want the men to be vulnerable with their feelings, I have to be too. That's really important. And now at age 77, one of my vulnerabilities is getting older, right? And, you know, getting older is not for the meek.
To say the least.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, and
it's an
all that we have,
understatement. Yeah.
and the letting go of what we can no longer do. It's a process, right? But back to the men's retreats. Um, Really, I feel the most important thing is to provide a safe container for men to really be vulnerable with each other and share their fears and their pain and their shame, because we don't typically do that enough. Okay. And one of the things, because so much of our work is most of our work actually is about couples. So when we see some unique things happening, okay, with men and with women, and what I see so much over the years is women, and whatever it's, maybe it's women's liberation, maybe it's whatever it is, women have become more and more empowered and actually strong, but but I see so often that they're paying a price.
Mhm.
And there's part of our work has to do with the truth that we're not just adults. We have these inner children. We have these young parts of ourselves. And sometimes what we see, what we both see with women, we see women being too much in their mother quality and not enough in their little girl quality.
Mm.
And the men who are with the women tend to be, not always, but often, are more comfortable being little boys than fathers. And we see this so often in couples where the woman is the mother and the man is the little boy, and the little boy sometimes gets angry because he feels mothered too much, and the woman becomes angry because the man doesn't step up as a husband or as a father. And so it's really important work. And I mean, those of you who are watching this, if you're in this category, which most of us are, you as men need to know that the woman you're with is also a little girl who needs your love and needs comforting and nurturing. And this is a really powerful thing. And if you're a woman watching this, you need to know that you're the man you're with is also a father, and you need that fathering. And it's a really sweet thing. I mean, it's so sweet when Joyce, sometimes she's having a hard time in her life, and maybe something happened that really threw her off. She will come and find me, and in the sweetest little girl voice, she'll say, Barry, would you please hold me and just let me know everything's going to be okay? Isn't that sweet?
Totally.
And what am I going to say? No, I'm too busy. That little girl coming out is so powerful that it just taps me in to the father in me that wants to hold her, right?
Yeah.
But for me to be the little boy, it's a little bit harder. Okay. And if something really hard happens to me, or really scary, I tend to forget about the little boy. And the few times that I come over to Joyce and ask her for her to hold me and hug me and comfort me, it makes her day. It's so beautiful for her to see that little boy and me vulnerable, right? Most of us as men, we've grown up learning that we need to hide the vulnerability. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, in the 50s, right? And it was gangs. Our block had the Jewish gang. The next block over was the Puerto Ricans. The other side was the Italians. It was gangs on the street at age 5 years old or 6 years old. If I showed any weakness, I'd get beaten up, right? That's sad. Yeah,
Tragic. It's
I know. I know. I was so hungry for friends. I was in the schoolyard. I don't know if I was 5 or 6, and a little boy came up to me, and I thought, wow, somebody might be my friend. And instead, he punched me in the solar plexus. I'd never been hit there. I crumpled. I couldn't breathe, right? I mean, these things, they're tragic, aren't they?
totally. And I
Yeah.
don't know if this is your experience, but I know for me, kind of my background, I grew up in California. I was born in New York City. If my
Yeah.
parents had stayed in New York, I probably would have had a more similar experience to you. But I came to California
Yeah.
and grew up in the suburbs in San Fernando Valley. But my experience at 5 years old was my father left, and the occasion of his leaving was that he had become increasingly depressed, withdrawn, angry, irritable,
Yeah.
because he couldn't make a living to support his family. He had been a playwright and actor in New York and had had some success, but in that period of time, the the depression happened, and
Yeah.
for him, I'm a little bit older than you, and my parents are older. Went through the depression in the 20s, and
Right.
the whole kind of theater scene uh, crumbled for him as a new actor, and eventually, I was born in 1943, so they came out to California in the mid 40s, and then after the war to hopefully get into the new television industry. But for him, he came from a very kind of liberal, progressive kind of background into California at a time when the Un-American Activities Committee was at its height, and
Right.
uh, you probably remember, as many do, the blacklisting period where
Yeah.
actors and playwrights who were left-leaning or progressive were thought to be communists, or maybe they were not loyal Americans. And so he was one of the blacklisted writers,
Right.
unable to work. And so at that time, he became depressed, and to a point where he took an overdose of sleeping pills, thinking,
Right.
if I can't support my family, what good am I? And maybe they'd be better off without me. That was kind of the feeling. And he didn't die. He was committed to a mental hospital, which was, as a 5-year old, I went with my uncle every Sunday to visit, with the
I
idea
know.
somehow I could maybe help my father. That was my mother's kind of admonition to me. You need to go and help your father. And as a 5-year-old, I didn't know how to do that, and it was beyond my abilities. But
Yeah.
it was at a time when I grew up without a father, and both a physically and emotionally absent father. And I think a lot of men grow up in some way with a father who is either absent physically or emotionally.
Yeah.
And so the idea of being a father I have 5 children now, and did my best to be a young father, but it was very hard if you didn't have the experience of being a father. And then when you become a husband, if you don't have the experience of being a strong, nurturing father, it's hard to allow yourself to be that in a relationship. And
Yeah.
And you say the upbringing, I didn't have so much the gang thing, but it was the don't be a sissy, be strong, be masculine, be tough, be
Yeah.
because if you would not, you're not a man. You're a sissy, you're homosexual, you're something less than a man.
Right.
So the result is very, very difficult to not only feel manly in ourselves, but to have a relationship, regardless of our sexual orientation, to be able to fulfill those roles of an adult, passionate person and to be able to be the father to the child in the woman or vice versa. So I
Right.
don't know, you're nodding your head about the father
Oh, it's,
wound kind of feeling.
I
Sounds
know.
like that was part of your experience as well as it is so many men and adds to our difficulties.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I remember your reading your story about your father and yeah, really connecting with that. And yes, I actually before we go on, if I should just mention our website. If anybody wants to learn more about what we're doing and our and relationship work and men's work, it's sharedheart.org. Sharedheart.org. Okay, and yes, a lot of us as men did not have role models. We didn't, or at least we didn't have healthy role models.
Right.
And we had to pioneer. We're pioneering. We're still pioneering. But to be a loving father, it can be learned, and it's really one of the most wonderful things, right? But to also be a little boy and to not just be the little boy who is wanting to play. Okay, that's sometimes well developed in a lot of men, the playfulness and the wanting to be in the moment. But the little boy who needs nurturing, the little boy who is scared, that's really very deep work.
Mm,
And in the men's retreats that I lead, that's so powerful to have each person really be vulnerable and be held by the group. There's something magical that happens.
mm,
And it doesn't happen in a group of couples, but
yeah.
with men, there's such a power because we all need healthy fathering and we all need to be fathering, right? So with that, I want to just maybe introduce that there's going to be a men's retreat happening March 15th in none other than Willits, California, where Jed lives. I'm from Santa Cruz, so I'm going to come up north and lead this. It's going to be a weekend, March 15th to the 17th. And if you go to our website, you get all the details, sharedheart.org.
That's so good. And I want to just kind of underline for me and the experience of the importance of men's groups
Yeah,
and men's support. And you've
yeah,
been doing it a long time. I've been doing it a long time. And just
yeah,
a little quick story of my own related to men's things is that, as I said, before I'd been through two marriages and divorces before I met Carlin. And I think a lot of it was because I didn't have the capacity to be uh, a healthy little boy or to be a father, even though I had children by that time. I really didn't know how to do it in the way that you're describing. And what I learned in the men's group early on, as I said, my men's group has been meeting regularly for 46 years. And one of the early experiences I had was one day I got really sick. I had a really bad cold and to a point where I couldn't take care of myself. I was alone. And that would be the time I would always seek out a woman. When I was a little child, it was my mother who could always take care of me when I was sick. When I was in my marriages, it was always the woman that would take care of me when I was sick, physically or emotionally. but there wasn't a woman in my life at the time. And so I was stuck. And the feeling was a terror. I'm sick, fear I'm going to die, and there's
Right.
nobody around. And it never occurred to me until in desperation, I called this friend who, this is actually before the men's group actually started. And
Mhm.
I just said, I'm really sick. And he immediately responded, oh, I'll come right over, which
Beautiful.
surprised me. I didn't know men knew how to do that or would do that. Or, if I
Right.
if I wasn't strong, who would want to be around me kind of feeling. But
Right.
he came over, he made me soup, he held me,
Uh,
he gave me a massage, which I'd never been nurtured in that way. And it was an awakening to both the part of me that had to be vulnerable. You talk about being vulnerable enough to say, I need help, I need care, and the recognition that men not only could do that, but would do that.
right.
And we're very capable of nurturing. I
Uh,
didn't know, I never had a father that was around long enough to do that. So
right.
what I know from my own men's group and many men's retreats that I've done, this is kind of, I think, essential learning that in some way you can't get any other place. You can't get
Mm.
it in mixed groups. You can't get it in
No.
couples work. It can enhance all those other things like your
Yes.
relationship,
Yes.
but you need to be, Robert Bly, I think, spoke it. Robert Bly is,
Yeah.
many know, a poet and writer and wrote numerous books. And I had the good fortune of spending time with him at retreats, and he hand signed a copy of a book that he wrote to me. And he talked about the necessity, he's talking about young boys, but
Mhm.
the young boy in each of us said
Yeah.
we need to be in the company of other men
Yeah.
in order to hear the sound that male cells sing. And that's,
Oh,
it just gives me shivers even to say it, because to experience it, that there is a vibration, there is a sound that male cells, all 10 trillion cells in our male bodies,
yeah.
reverberate and titrate and connect with other male cells
Yeah.
that we can only get from being in the company of men. So I really
Yes. I
encourage
know.
everybody, whether you come to this particular retreat, if you can, I hope you will. There's many others that you do in other places and at other times. And I really just want to underline that, in addition to back to your latest book. Let me just hold it up again, because it's so unusual that a a healer and a man and a partnership, because this is a book not just Barry, you happen to be the one on camera today.
Right.
It's Joyce and Barry, and I know Joyce quite well and can picture her as well. But it's as though, and I'll just share personally my reading of the book, it's as though that couple who has been through it all, both the hardships and the magic and the tuning in and the nurturing parents that we all wish we had when we were little kids, kind of bring us into their loving embrace and share all of that with us. Both feels like you're being held and nurtured and touched in all these ways. So I really recommend Barry and Joyce's books, their retreats, their work, and if you can come to Willits, what a wonderful time. You can meet us all, right? You meet Barry, I'll be there. Be a wonderful way of connecting. I'm looking forward to it. And so anything else you'd like to say, Barry, about the work or things that
Uh,
so much, but as we're
yeah.
kind
Well,
of coming to the end of our little
yeah.
together today, what else would you like to share?
Well, um, while you were talking, I was just feeling the subtle layers of homophobia that keep men away from other men.
Yeah.
Okay. Many men nowadays, profess outwardly that, they hug other men and they love other men, but so much there's this little thing, right? And it is homophobia. It's a very subtle thing where it's a fear of being too close to a man that might mean they might be gay, right? Or
You
whatever.
might be gay if you have any feeling of, ooh, I like being touched. I mean, there's
I
subtle
know,
fears and not so subtle
I
fears.
know. And that happens at every men's retreat. It's a reluctance for men, first of all, to show up. But then there's a reluctance to really open up because of that fear. And by the end of the men's retreat, there's a couple of things that happen. One, men feel so connected and so loved in a way that they can't from women. It's a different kind of love. And the only other thing I want to say was that after every one of my men's retreats, I get emails from the partners after the men get home thanking me.
Yeah,
So whatever happens in the men's retreat, the way the men open up, they bring it home.
yeah,
And that's such a beautiful gift. And that feels so good to me.
yeah.
Such a reward to know that the men's work translates into the relationship work. Yeah.
And I want to just in a kind of a little wrap up, to broaden this beyond the couple relationships, because we're living at a time in human history where our relationships beyond our partnerships, our marriages, our communities, our politics, our place in the world is really under real threat. And I don't think I'm exaggerating, at least my
Right.
experience, to say that we're really at a time in human history where if we don't, get our partnership world healed, because of various wounds that we've had personally and in our world, that we're really in trouble. And uh, there's a comedian who I quote quite a bit that speaks to this. Her name's Elaine Boozler, and she commented again humorously, but I think with some real insight. She said, "When women get depressed, they eat or go shopping. Men invade another country. It's a whole different way of thinking."
I know.
And it's both, we see wars going on, and it isn't just the wars of violence, but which is destroying our environment and our world, but
Yeah.
it's the wars within us that are going on inside us, the wars that we have with each other, when we're afraid to get close, and then we get afraid and we get angry. So I just want to put in a little plug for, we do a thing, and I'll just put this into the mix for people who want to follow up with this piece of my work. A group of us started what we call our Moonshot for Mankind, which is a coming together of organizations and individuals who really recognize the healing that needs to happen in our own hearts and our own relationships and our couples work and in our world at
Yeah.
this time in human history. So you can reach me through, it's called Moonshot, Moonshot, Moonshot for FOR, mankind, all spelled out, MANKIND.com, moonshotformankind.com. And it's open to everybody, men and women, because we're all part of this, organizations that are doing work as well as individuals. And my personal work, it's called menalive.com. Nice, simple name and nice, simple representation of what I do. And this has been a total delight to hang out with Barry. The time's gone by very fast. We'll have to
Very
do this
fast.
again so we can share more, and hopefully we can chat again before the retreat in March. But as we start at this time, getting into the next year, 2024. I think if you've ever thought of stretching wherever you are to a little deeper and broader connection, think
Yeah.
of the retreat that Barry's going to be doing with men. Check out the other work that Barry and Joyce do all the time and will continue to, and be healthy and happy and joyful. And really want to thank you, Barry, and look forward to our continuing work together, our continuing joy together, and our continuing relationship wisdom that we're learning in our own lives and are sharing with others.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jed. I really, I'm so grateful for the work you do. And it is all about really learning to love from within. And that's what changes the world. That's what changes it.
It does.
Yeah. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Okay.
Farewell.